Well, I guess it's time to talk about when I went vegan and why I went vegan. And I'm going to try to keep it a little brief because it's really tempting to give you my entire life story from day one. Uh, but I can say that early on in my life, I started having stomach problems. Because I was fed cow's milk. In the beginning, I wasn't nursed. Okay, so we were off to a great start. We got a lot of years to cover. But fast forward about 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, I was just really having trouble, and it had been worse. I began to realize there's some relationship to food, and of course, I've been an environmentalist my whole life, and I knew that the cattle industry was destroying forests, and I'm a tree hugger. I love forests, and yet like most Americans, I had been brainwashed into thinking that you need at least some. And so by 2014, not really out of any particular ethical thing, but was more just kind of working on my own, we'll call it peak performance, how I went through the day. And the idea of eating animals, it just kind of dropped. But I was still consuming dairy products, and I had no real sensitivity for the relationship of dairy to the rest of the cattle industry. And I was having eggs. And I was just still having, even though the worst of my stomach problems seemed to have been solved, I was still having problems. And I called a friend who I had a sense knew something about food and the body. And she didn't talk about veganism. She just talked about eating way more fruit. She wanted me to somehow discover which foods were upsetting me and on my own. But we started the morning with like huge amounts of melon and then huge amounts of fruit. And what I can see in retrospect was she was kind of trying to get me into eating a raw food diet. And that helped some, but it just didn't seem to really be helping. And enough, shall we say, it just wasn't helping enough. And by 2016, I just had a lot of issues. Just my energy was really low. And I really didn't know why, because it wasn't like I was really unhappy per se. I just had really low energy. And I had enough energy to like lie around and watch YouTube and I could maybe, rouse myself up just to make sure I didn't get kicked out of my apartment or things like that. I mean, I've never been, for background, I've never been into drugs per se. I don't drink alcohol. So it wasn't like I was doing anything external that should have made me feel that way. And I started, so watching YouTube, you know how it works. You start looking for answers, and suddenly there was, some YouTubers are saying, well, here's how to. I wasn't actually looking for a vegan diet. The thought hadn't really crossed my mind, but suddenly I was starting to see, different doctors like Dr. McDougall and all these guys were talking about the relationship to diet and all these other issues. And so I was beginning to get the science behind the diet. But what really happened was then I came across a video of what happens to male chicks in the egg industry. And if you're watching this, you don't need me to explain it to you. If you don't know, do some research and see what happens to male chicks in the egg industry. And I watched that. And suddenly I thought, my God, I cannot believe that I've been a participant in this really unspeakable violence. It's just, the cruelty is beyond comprehension. When you really look at the animal industry, the cruelty is beyond comprehension, which is why those industries have to come up with laws that say, oh, you can't speak poorly about the meat and dairy industry, or you can't take pictures. It's illegal to see what goes on in these places because it's beyond disgusting. It's even beyond a disgrace. There's really no words to describe how wrong it is, and nobody is telling you can't like take a picture of an apple orchard. They don't have to defend because that's our food. Fruit is our food, and animals are not our food. That's what I realized. I realized through the science part that animals are not human food. But, decades of being acculturated to that, the real defining moment was seeing the cruelty. So it was the combination of all the reasons, all the science, all the environmental logic. And that was maybe about 4 months of me just sort of binge watching everything about veganism on YouTube. And then when I really got a good view of what was really going on, I just said, that's the day. That was September 1st, 2016. And what's so amazing is that day, within 2 weeks, things really started turning around. It really was, the cheese, a little bit of cheese, a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of eggs or whatever. That was it. And soon I was, my energy just rebounded. I started rock climbing with my sons. I mean, my life started actually working really. I really had no idea what was wrong before. So that's the day, and that's the short story of it. And the interesting thing is that Title III, which I always talk about, because I've been interested in public financing. These days there's a word for it. It's called public venture capital. The idea of the general public financing startups, that's how it used to be before 1933. That's how startups were financed, from the general public. And then it moved in this whole private, weird world. When people say they don't like capitalism, it's because it became kind of a dark art practiced by people in private. And anything that's done in private is just, it leads to suspicion. Let's just say that. And not having the public involved in capitalizing companies has been, I think, a real detriment to capitalism. And it's created a false scarcity with a relatively small number of practitioners being kind of at the control of what gets funded. And what gets funded is what gets built in the world. So financiers have a very big impact on our three-dimensional world. So 2016 was the year that regulation crowdfunding came about. But I had started my venture, my adventure. My attempt to do public finance started in 2001. I wanted to build an ecological finance company. I didn't know anything about finance at that time. But, why would I let that stop me? I could see, because my whole thesis is that finance is the right operating platform for people who would normally fall into the world of charities or government out of an altruistic desire. And now there's a word for it. It's called impact investing. But back in 2001, the environmentalists didn't trust anybody who had money, and people who had money just couldn't imagine that you could do anything for the environment and make a buck at it, which was wrong, because my very first company that I started in 1983 was an environmental business, and I made money doing that. But if you're not looking, you just can't see the opportunities, but they're everywhere. There's just trillions of dollars of opportunities in this space. But the whole idea was to use, I had done political organizing from a grassroots nonprofit perspective for 10 years. That was actually very successful, but it was very limited. And I thought, if we really want to make the world different, we've got to give people jobs. We have to really create the economy that we want. We can't just yell at people to take care of the environment. They don't know what to do. You have to literally build the economy that they can live in and take care of the environment at the same time. So that was my thesis. It didn't go so well because we didn't have much in the way. I mean, if you wanted to engage the public, you needed millions of dollars, and I didn't at that time really have a good grasp on how to raise the millions I needed in order to create a publicly traded early stage fund. So 2016, May 16th, 2016, regulation crowdfunding became, the rule became official. And then September 1st, 2016, I went vegan. And the thing about the reason I believe veganism is so important for the world is because it really changes your body chemistry in a very positive way. And our thoughts are so tied to our body chemistry. And a lot of the things that I had worked on with spiritual practices or whatever, suddenly I thought, God, if I'd just been eating bowls of rice, if I'd been eating a vegan diet, I might not have ever even ventured down some of those paths, because it's so effective at improving your outlook of life. And that's half the problem. We're the world. There's a lot of people in a very warlike state, and it's because of their diet. It makes them, it damages their liver, it damages their body chemistry, and they just can't see straight. They can't think straight. And I had always been more or less a vegetarian. Again, that's not so great, but I ate a lot less meat than most of the people that I knew because we didn't cook it at home. Every once in a while, I would get an urge for a Reuben sandwich, and I would have to go out. This in Washington, D.C. I would leave the house and go to one of the the restaurants on Capitol Hill, Hawk and Dove, and get a Reuben sandwich, and then go back and, okay, I'm satisfied now, because I just wasn't eating right. And so out of not eating right, then I would develop this craving for a Reuben sandwich once every couple of weeks. So my whole outlook, my mental state, my energy, everything started improving. And one day, about a year later, in 2017, it just, all of a sudden I had this insight. It's like the thing I had been trying to do since 2001. I'd set it down for like 5 years. From 2010 to 2015, I was just watching the industry without trying my hand at finance. I was just doing consulting and web development to be, clear about what I was doing for those 5 years and making other people successful. In 2016, I thought, you know what, I need to get back and build my own company, whatever that is. But my energy just wasn't aligned with me being successful. So again, 2016, I went vegan. And about a year later, suddenly in that mental clarity, I just had this flash. It's like, wow, I could actually achieve what I was trying to achieve before on a shoestring. These new laws really make things possible that were just not possible since 1933. And I've been following that path really ever since. Formally launched Vegan Lunch on April 7th, 2018. And because I'd been mentoring so many other people in business design or building businesses for them, I made some other people very successful building companies for them. And I followed my own mentoring, and I built Vegan Lunch using my own methodology. And it doesn't look like the kind of thing you want to read about in some, mainstream media idea of what entrepreneurship is. I've been taking a very methodical approach. Because why? Because I didn't want to get in a situation where I would be risking other people's money. Part of the ethic of Silicon Valley is fail fast. And that's cool as long as you've got a lot of investors who are into that. And out there in Silicon Valley, they do. They do. But I I didn't want to put other people's money at stake until I felt like I had a lot of proofs of concept. And so I basically bootstrapped Vegan Lunch and used certain, you might say, very lean business design principles in proving one thing or another. And then the more I proved, the more I was willing to put into the company, the more risk I was willing to take of my own relatively limited savings, and what I could borrow. So pretty much I put everything I had, everything I could borrow into Vegan Lunch, and it booted up enough that here we are, really now fulfilling on the promise. And the last several months, the last 18 months, we helped provide capital to a number of very cool companies and mentoring people. And it's just very nice to speak with other people who are also enjoying that good body chemistry that you get. And the thing is, it's not just the food. This is the other thing. When I talk about the 2016 moment where that was the day, it was the commitment. And I think I've said this in some other videos, but the ethical commitment to veganism itself is very good for your body chemistry. That holding a commitment in a powerful way has a very powerful effect on your whole experience of life, because our mind is very, very powerful in terms of generating our reality and our body chemistry. So that too, it wasn't just the food. The food helped, but what it really was the commitment first. And then the food supported me in that commitment. In fact, I remember one time, because this is, everyone that goes vegan has some kind of issues in their social circle. And my social circle was kind of small at the time. And I was spending time with my kids. And my kids, well, the idea of veganism was certainly kind of new to them. We didn't raise them that way. And I found myself, if I took them out for breakfast and they wanted to eat, an egg omelet or something, I was just feeling really sick watching them eat that. And then once I went to a donut shop, and every single donut had eggs in it, and I didn't want to be a bad sport, so I ate a donut with an egg in it. A few months in. And that, right, if it's just diet, you could rationalize that, but there's something about that, and I just said, this is not how I want to live. And I didn't know exactly what to say to my kids. And then it came to me, and I told them, I said, listen, guys, the cigarette industry, we all know smoking cigarettes causes cancer, it's deadly. But for years, for decades, they tried to suppress the information about that and try to trick people into thinking it was healthy when they themselves knew that it was wrong, and they still do it, which is really ungodly sick when you think about it. And I said, I recently, over the past year, I've educated myself, and I realized in 10 years from now, we're talking, this is about 2017, I said in 10 years from now, it'll be widely understood that eating animals is terrible for your health. And I said, I don't want to lecture you about veganism. All I'm saying is when you're alone or on your own, you're going to do whatever you want. I'm not going to control that. But if I'm taking you out to eat, or if you're having dinner at my house, if I'm paying or you're in my space, we're eating vegan. We're not eating any animals, because I wouldn't buy you an egg omelet any more than I'd buy you a pack of cigarettes. And I regret not knowing this earlier, but now that I know, I'm telling you, so you'll know. And you make your own choices. And that was it. Then I didn't have to lecture. And it's been a very beautiful relationship with my sons. But I was, in thinking that, I just thought, God, I could really risk my relationship with them even with that level of conviction. But instead, the conviction resulted in a very beautiful outcome for me and my sons. And I didn't have to lecture, I didn't have to whine or wheedle or anything like that. That's the power of commitment. It's very powerful. And that's why I called it Vegan Lunch, not, this is a very straightforward in support of the vegan ethic, because it's the commitment that's so powerful. And as a financier person, I don't do finance out of greed. I'm not motivated. I wish I was greedier. I would have more money sometimes, in my own bank account. I'm doing this because I believe it's the right tool to use for a myriad of issues that aren't getting solved right now. Public finance has an opportunity to solve things that Wall Street is either unwilling or unable to do, because private finance works in a very different way. So I called it Vegan Lunch because it's not just the plant-based economy. The plant-based economy is cool, for sure. But the vegan ethical economy, it may never have as many adherents from the ethical framework, but I can tell you this is where the money is. The money is in the ethic, in the commitment. I'm not going to try to use this video to explain it, but I can see crystal clear. It's just because it's you get a very different business design if it's just plant-based. If plant-based is kind of a flavor, then you get a situation like with a big company like Tyson Foods. They're in the plant-based protein economy, and they're also in the animal economy. Now, no vegan would do that. And so the kind of decisions that you make, and right now, those decisions are very damaging to, in the end, their own finances. Because what will happen is people wake up and understand there's two things that are going to happen. People are going to gradually wake up and realize the one thing everyone can do to solve climate change is stop eating animals. That's the number one thing. And the number one thing you can do for your health is to stop eating animals. And as that understanding gets farther and farther understood by humanity, companies like Tyson are going to have quite a lot of stranded assets. And it's already happening. This is, the failure to recognize this is really dangerous. You could say Tyson, they're kind of a little bit ahead of the curve because they're trying to have their feet in both worlds. They're trying to milk every penny they can get out of the meat side, but they're not going to carry. See, the thing is, they're making money inside of a context. The plant-based economy came from veganism. Otherwise, no one would really care. What would anybody care? But except for all the creativity that's gone into creating plant-based food products, substitutes. That came from veganism. So they're riding a wave that was created by veganism, but they're not putting anything into the wave itself. That's not leadership. What can I say about this? That's the level of mentality they're at. This is not, the point of this video is not to exactly rail against them. It's just to see that the kind of bad decisions you make, if without having the vegan ethical commitment and looking at plant-based as just kind of, a trend, as opposed to something much more powerful. Veganism is not a trend. It's an understanding. It's a kind of an understanding like any other major paradigm shift, like the understanding that the Earth is in orbit around the sun and not the other way around. That is a transformational paradigm shift, a point of view. So something that big creates vast economic opportunities. If we use the vegan ethic as opposed to plant-based ethic, the market opportunities are vast, much vaster. I estimate the market opportunities of the vegan economy is about $20 trillion of annual turnover of industries that are opportunities to transform around a vegan ethical framework. So that is, I'm not doing it again because I'll make more money. Maybe I will make more money. That's good. I mean, I want all of us who care to make more money. We should have it. Why not? I'm not against that at all. But I'm just saying it's a more powerful framework because the commitment is more powerful than only what we put in our mouths. And I'm so happy because here I'm doing these videos this way. The amount of transformation that's happened in my life in the last 4 years of this now. So, yeah, 4.25. I'm so grateful for everyone that poured their energy into helping me get to this point. And now I have the energy just to give as much as I possibly can to other people, help the vegan entrepreneurs, and through helping them, they're going to help millions and millions of people transition. That's my story. I think that's a that's a good place to stop this story. I'll tell you some other stories in another video. Thanks a lot. If you made it this far, thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.